resignation like this is going to get headlines. It's a big deal that a senior Trump administration official is quitting explicitly in opposition to the war. On the other hand, the content of the letter is what gave a lot of people pause. I'm curious what you made of it.
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, obviously, you should be concerned when the director of the National Counterterrorism Center quits over a war that you're in the middle of from the largest state-sponsored terrorism in the world. At the same time, you know, the things he said, the idea that that Israel stoked this war, that we had gotten into this war because Israel pushed us into it. I mean, Donald Trump is not the kind of guy to get pushed into a war. He may be a lot of things. That is not what he is.
You know, this is a very complicated thing. This guy has said some anti-Semitic things. At the very same time, which is problematic, like no, full stop. At the very same time, soon after the war started, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, said that the imminent threat was that we knew that Iran was that if Iran was attacked, and we believed that it would be attacked by Israel, that they would immediately come after us. And that was the immediate threat that they used as a rationale for the war. So both things are operating at the same time. This guy is very problematic because he has anti-Semitic sentiments. At the very same time, the administration, that was their first rationale for the war, was that they thought that Israel was going to strike first, that Iran would strike back, and they would strike us when they struck back, and that would precipitate a wider conflict, and we would have consequences from that.
But there's one point that I think is important in that Marco Rubio was part of all of the intelligence briefings on this, and Joe Kent was not. So Marco Rubio had access to everything that Joe Kent did not have access to. What was also left out of that letter was Joe Kent's plans now, I suppose, to be part of this resistance, go on podcasts that have been very critical of Israel. This is someone who, over the course of the next few days, you'll see more reporting on how he was seen as a chief leaker in this White House. And that goes to some of the problems I have with some folks who are now amplifying Joe Kent as if they agree with him or as if they suddenly believe that he is someone to be trusted on
Donald Trump amplified Joe Kent because he put him in charge of the National Counterterrorism Center. And in addition to that,
if he was a leaker and if he was bad on national security, why leave somebody in a sensitive, important job like that if you thought that he was disloyal, leaking, and he was bad on the substance of the thing that he was in charge of?
We're assuming that the Office of the Director of National Intelligence is an important job. I mean, it's kind of a bureaucratic, nowheresville. Yeah, I'm torn on Joe Kent because on the one hand, he did primary and defeat a colleague and friend of mine, Jamie Herrera Butler, in 2022. On the other hand, he has a decorated career as a Green Beret, as a CIA paramilitary officer. He lost his wife, Shannon, in 2019 in Syria. He's a Gold Star husband. And I give him the benefit of the doubt on the reasons for his resignation in this case. I think the question of whether or not a resignation should have been public is one thing. I think it is right and appropriate if you do not feel you can faithfully execute and support the policies of administration you're working for, you should resign. That is the appropriate thing to do in the natural course. I have more questions about the statement that Tulsi Gabbard put out because on the one hand, it was a masterclass in saying something without saying anything at all. On the other hand, you're going before Congress tomorrow.
She has not been seen or heard of in months. Probably for this exact reason, because we're at war with Iran. And she has explicitly said she did not believe that we should be at war with Iran.
And has been on record saying it for years. So let's not act as though this is a new thing with this administration. She has been on record for quite some time through multiple administrations, voicing her opinion against going to war with Iran for the exact same reasons that many of the individuals who the Trump administration fired regarding Iranian intelligence, those individuals were against it as well. I think that with Kent, it's important to recognize, and it's a good point that I believe Charles made earlier, this is a guy who's looking at his career path after this. He's also somebody who understands the MAGA fissures. And at the end of the day, there are a lot of people who aligned around Trump in 2016 and 2020 and in 2024 who did it almost solely because this man talked about no more endless wars. These are individuals who watched what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. These are individuals who trusted that he was going to put America first, meaning we're not going and creating wars and chaos in other places, and recognize fully that their young men and women in the armed forces may be up next. As you can recall, just a week ago, his press secretary did not leave it off the table that the possibility of a draft could happen, which wild, by the way. This is a president who has not stood by the very thing that he ran on. And many people are seeing this as problematic, but are also questioning the allegiance with Israel because it does seem that there is some puppeteering going on backstage. And that's not anti-Semitic. That is just a question that they have because they also
usually when you bring up Israel, and I don't think your intention was that, but usually when people talk about puppeteering and Jews, it's clear anti-Semitic.
Joe Kent's theory of the case is clear in his resignation letter. This is not about him quitting because he's got some big dispute with this Iran war. By the way, if he wanted to quit because of the Iran war, he could have quit 3 weeks ago. He waited a long time. Joe Kent, I predict, is running for office again. He's going to go on Tucker Carlson's show tomorrow, the same show, or this next week, the same show that put Nick Fuentes on the air. He's expressed those same views, and he's going to get support from that toxic part of the Republican Party that is both anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim and spouts all the kind of rhetoric that we as Americans should be disgusted with.
What about this idea that there was no imminent threat?
No, and I think that's something where in Tulsi Gabbard's statement, she left a lot of room for ambiguity on that, whether or not she agreed with the Trump administration's decision. And imminent threat can be interpreted in a number of ways, right? This is what is being used to give the legal authority under the Article 2 Commander-in-Chief self-defense provisions, right? So this is where, the legal statute, the legal kind of basis comes. And it can mean, Tulsi Gabbard is not wrong. It can mean whatever the president wants.
Yeah, but can it mean?
No, it can't.
Well, can it
Actually,
mean
can't.
because I feel like it? Because that's
standpoint.
effectively the explanation from Trump is I felt like it. So there was an imminent threat because I felt in my gut that it was going to happen. Is that really the standard, the legal standard for?
I mean, in this case, it not only matters. The Article 2 self-defense provisions have a very wide latitude.
Okay.
The Supreme Court has been willing to grant a lot of latitude to the president. Congress can check that, but they'll keep passing.
So the president basically saying, I've seen no actual evidence, but I just felt it. The president could theoretically say that about any nation anywhere in the world.
But at least in Iran,
I mean, really, I'm legitimately is that really the standard? Because at least, back when the Bush administration was making the case to go to war in Iraq, right? They presented evidence. It was flawed, but they presented something. They went to the United Nations and they said, look at this stuff. Look at these images. Look at this intelligence. We have seen zero. Zip,
right?
Nothing.
But Abby, that's more about what this president believes he can get away with Congress and with the American public, right? The president believes that he can put a case out to the American public, say, I want to go to war with Iran. They presented him a threat, and he doesn't need to array the evidence, right? And in fact, as it turns out, Congress hasn't done anything about it, right?
Congress hasn't done anything about half the stuff he's done.
Right, that's right. And
the American public is pissed.
And Congress, this is a good way to think about it. The American public may be pissed, but this war is actually polling pretty well amongst Republicans. Even with the MAGA base being upset, and I think you're right, the MAGA base is very upset with President Trump and what he's done here. I think Joe Kent is tapping into that. I think other folks like Tucker Carlson have tapped into that. But there's a different strain going on there. There's a movement in the Republican Party that is very problematic and very toxic, and that's where this is coming from. And let's be honest.
What is the this? What is this coming from? What do you mean?
The
war itself?
The tone in Joe Kent's letter. Joe Kent, first of all, Joe Kent doesn't have to defend the Iran.
We've established that Joe Kent's a problem. I think we need to establish whether or not there was an imminent threat. I don't think that the words imminent threat have as much elasticity as you believe that they have. I believe they have a definition, and that there was no imminent threat, and that they have yet never outlined an imminent threat. And what conservatives often do, I've seen this over and over and over, is they switch from imminent threat to Iran's a bad guy. We're a bad country. We all can agree with that. We can all agree that they have been the mastermind behind a lot of terror in the world. All that's true. The problem, though, is whether or not there was an imminent threat that dictated that war was necessary at this moment.
But Charles,
that has never been made clear, not just to me, but to the American people.
But Charles, I think that there is an imminent threat. There's a lot of reasons why. One, we know Iran has been pursuing a nuclear weapon for a long time. We know that Iran has killed hundreds and hundreds of Americans on the battlefield in Iraq with improvised explosive devices. They gave.
How long were we at war in Iraq?
Whatever.
Whatever. Don't do that. You know the answer.
A good long time. We were in a war in Afghanistan a good long time. It doesn't change the fact that Iran killed tons of Americans.
That's again, you're doing what I was just saying that other people do. You're trying to make elastic the idea of imminent. Imminent is not that. Imminent is not. This is the whole case of the history of this country and how badly they have behaved. You cannot condense that into the word imminent. It does not work. It does not work. It does not work.
Hold on, you can't.
Was there no diplomatic option before we got?
They attempted a diplomatic option.
Are we talking about
he restrained quite a few.
But are we talking about the legal standard for war powers that has been set in precedent, or are we talking about sort of our feelings and rhetorical and what things should be?
Legal versus the
where
political
it is right now.
Yeah.
Yes, the war powers resolution, which many presidents say doesn't really exist and they don't believe it's constitutional. Trump still notified
every
Congress.
president since
Every president, yes,
Democrat and Republican.
Trump still notified Congress and said, hey, yeah, the clock starts now. Whether or not he'll obey that, I mean, we could go back to a Libya model back in 2013 under Obama. Like, the war powers have been a problem with every president.
But you can't even invoke the Libya model because it doesn't work here.
Until Congress.
There was a NATO-led operation. It was not just us renegading. They were enforcing a UN resolution.
Not legal.
This was not renegading like this.
One thing that this underscores is the degree to which the president did or didn't sell his war effort with those who have been his most loyal supporters in the MAGA wing. I mean, here was Tucker Carlson's reaction, to Joe Kent stepping down. He says this, quote, "Joe's the bravest man I know, and he can't be dismissed as a nut. He's leaving a job that gave him access to highest level relevant intelligence. The neocons will now try to destroy him for that. He understands that and did it anyway."
Look, I think I want to underscore something Zach was reporting about Tulsi Gabbard's statement. The fact that she was very careful because, Tulsi Gabbard, arguably her entire political identity has been around, her reasoning for leaving the Democratic Party and supporting Donald Trump was to prevent a war against Iran. So if I was looking for the first resignation in the intelligence community, and I actually expected it to be from Tulsi Gabbard.
Okay.
The fact that this is among her deputies, I think, is not surprising. But what I find fascinating by this is a couple things. One is it's quite the Rorschach test on your own political views, right? If you're against the war, you can cherry pick from his statement. If you're for it, you can go after certain aspects of it. But I look at it in a couple different ways. Way number one, this reminds me of the Marjorie Taylor Greene split.
Right.
I think Joe Kent was a true believer. And so you've now, just like Marjorie Taylor Greene, a true believer in the MAGA movement, really thought that Trump said what he believed when it came to foreign wars. I think really saw himself more in this sort of old/new wing of the Republican Party that's more escalationist. Hey, what are we doing here? Right? So in some cases, this is, I think, a canary in the coal mine on that aspect of it.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's been very troubling to me about this, besides the fact that he didn't prepare the country for this and sell the rationale for it, was the president also has not warned the country that we are more vulnerable today. We are less safe today, particularly those of us living in Washington, because of this war than we were before the war started. It's just a fact. And nobody would see that any clearer than somebody working at the National Counterterrorism Center.
Congressman, do you see it the way kind of Chuck just outlined there? I mean, especially the considerations inside the party?
I don't know that I do. Look, number one, Joe Kent wasn't elected president. Donald Trump was. Number two, Trump has a much broader array of considerations than just those that Joe Kent's looking at. And the second thing that I can't get over, Joe Kent's letter said that there was no imminent threat. So are we supposed to wait for Iran to get a nuclear weapon and then we go? This doesn't make sense to me. I will tell you, if 50 years ago, if I were president and had a chance to go prevent North Korea from ever getting a nuclear weapon because they're crazy, as Iran is crazy, has killed American soldiers, largest funder of terrorism across the globe, I would have gone in and prevented North Korea. And I think that what President Trump is likely doing in this case is preventing Iran from becoming a North Korea and cutting off the largest funder of terrorism in the world.
Worth noting, Tulsi Gabbard posted this at 3:32 just a short while ago. As our commander-in-chief, Donald Trump, is responsible for determining what is and is not an imminent threat.
Well, but it's interesting because the president and
Don't look at me. Don't blame me. I'm just the DNI here.
But the president and his team are not making as cohesive and coherent a case as you just did, Congressman. I mean, they're not making an argument, from the person on down that this was an effort to prevent an imminent threat, to defang Iran's nuclear capabilities. In fact, we were told after the bombing last summer that their nuclear capabilities had been obliterated. So I think the fact that what the American people are consistently hearing from the administration is an array of different excuses, an array of different reasons. They're not making a clear, concise argument to the American people. And so now you have somebody sitting in a job in the NCTC, who, by the way, I and many other Democrats would have argued should have never been there in the first place. So this is not, this is not an argument for Joe Kent to be in that role. But the idea that what the average American is going to see today is a significant counterterrorism figure in President Trump's administration has now stepped down because he doesn't believe that the case that the administration is sort of haphazardly making is accurate. That's not a convincing message for an American public that is wary of this incursion in the first place.
Yeah. I want to play, Chuck, for you, something that Congressman Jared Moskowitz said about Joe Kent here, because we have seen, some Democrats seize on this letter that he wrote to say that, they were right on the policy of Iran. But Moskowitz had some comments about the person that Joe Kent is. Let's watch what he said.
He may have been confirmed by the Senate. He wasn't confirmed by Democrats. He was confirmed by Republicans, okay? This is a guy who went on Nazi sympathizer podcasts. This is someone who's espoused pro-Kremlin. He's not exactly the messenger here that I think we should be putting up, even if you agree with some of his points in the letter. So I'm glad he's gone. He should never have gotten that position, quite frankly. He ran a very extreme campaign with, racist, Islamophobic sort of language when he ran for Congress, when he lost, which is why he wound up in the administration.
And Chuck, this was Josh Gottheimer. Joe Kent resigning and immediately pivoting to blaming Israel for everything is as predictable as it is unserious. Scapegoating Israel isn't just a tired anti-Semitic trope, it's anti-American. Then he calls him a guy with ties to white supremacists and has Panzer tattooed on his arm, which refers to a Nazi tank infamously used in crimes against Jews.
This is what I mean when I like there's so much to grab at. It is why I view it almost as a Rorschach test for the critics as much as the person who he is. I mean, look, the reason a Democrat represents the district in Washington State that he ran in, Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, is because of this candidacy. He was that out there, that far out of the mainstream. But, look, this smearing of all things, Israel, when it comes to this decision, is something the administration themselves have invited, and it's very frustrating to watch especially when Marco Rubio said what he said. Right, that was the statement that has sort of, I think, done the most damage to people that are trying to be supportive.
When he said, well, Israel was going to go ahead and do this, so we needed to do it.
Yeah, and it was this, and I was like, oh, great. And we do. You have a unification of the anti-Israel left and the anti-Israel right on this, and it's collectively. I don't know if you've seen this, but there's some new polling for the first time. There's more sympathy less sympathy for Israel. It used to be, as I think Gallup asked this question, more sympathy towards the Israelis or the Palestinians. And it was always the Israelis would have the plurality advantage. No longer anymore because of what's happening here on the far right and the far left, where Israel is being used as this wedge issue.